Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Omnium Gatherum, May the Bridges We Burn Light the Way, out November 7th on Century Media Records. This album has 9 tracks, 40 minutes in length, and this is the band's 10th full-length studio album. They are a Finnish melodic death metal band. Now when it comes to the design of this record, I felt like the album was extremely complete as an overall album experience, or at least offering that overall album experience. This doesn't mean that previous records didn't have that sort of vibe, but I feel like this album defines it a lot better from the get-go all the way through the end of the record. The individual songs on the album can also exist outside of the context of this record. They have their own ability to do so. They have their own DNA. They really feel like they have a sense of individuality to them. But when you listen to this album from beginning to end, it's undeniable that the quality that comes to the surface really represents the album well as an overall product, as an overall whole, and that gives quality to what the experience of listening to this album is all about. Once you get into the sound of this record, I think this is the perfect sequence from Origin. I'm not a huge fan of comparing records with one another. I think you have to look at each album individually and then judge the album for what it offers, not for what the previous record offered, and perhaps this one offers something different. But it's almost impossible not to look at Origin and this one from a soundscape point of view, because I feel like there is a bridge between them, and this album is the logical next step that you would take on that bridge as the band continues to develop, as the band continues to grow. A lot of the sound on this record started perhaps with Origin in terms of how that sound develops and how that sound morphs. Specifically, I'm talking about the guitars and the synths. If you look at the synths first, on this album, the synths definitely offer a big piece, an important piece of the puzzle as far as the overall sound is concerned, helping the melodic side of the record tremendously, still offering at times that neon 80s experience that we saw with Origin. Not as much on this record, at least not as much on a consistent basis throughout this record, but elements of Origin as far as the synth sound and the experience that comes with it still present here. And then you have that development into a more melodic perspective that's always been part of the DNA of the band. So you start to see the merger of two different worlds coming together under that synth experience, which, like I said, plays a huge role into what the overall experience sound-wise is going to be all about. The same to a certain extent could be said about the guitars. The guitar sound on this album is really well-rounded, a complete sound mixing modern elements with more classic elements as far as the band is concerned, and still bringing some of that 80s rock experience that we saw in Origin, bringing that onto this record, but not allowing that to be the common denominator across each and every single song. It's more of a subtle difference or a subtle element that adds a certain spice within songs, from song to song, within pockets of specific songs, but like I said, not a common denominator that linears out the overall guitar experience. This album is a lot more versatile from that sense. It pulls back from what we heard before, but it also moves the needle forward, allowing the guitars to be melodic, pairing up really well with that more melodic side of the synths, allowing the guitars to have a certain bite, to be heavy, not overly heavy, but heavy enough to give the songs some substance, so you're not heavily dependent on the vocal performance for that heaviness, so for that the tracks to feel more complete, more robust. So the versatility of the guitars offer this album a lot of movement, a lot of different ideas, a lot of different perceptions as far as the listener is concerned. I always felt like the guitars kind of had two different paths almost on every single song. The more melodic path, and then the more straightforward, heavier riffing style path. It's important to have these two because it allows the band to create more robust, more textured, definitely more rich songs. This album really has a lot of richness in the sound, and a lot of that richness comes and starts at the guitars with the experience that they put forward, with the dualities that exist within the overall soundscape, and how important they are in order to allow the band to bring in elements of the previous record, bring in elements that have always been there from the beginning of this band to now, and perhaps mold them into what this band can be going forward. A band that has a very rock element at its origin of the sound, but then creating their own version of what Finnish melodic death metal can be, with those guitars and those synths adding to that melody and distorting a little bit of that underlining rock and roll that this band also has a lot at its essence. Once you get into the vocals, this is where you're going to find the red line of the entire album. The vocal performance on this record connects really well with the sound that was created for this album. More so, once again, I hate to do this, but more so than Origin. This album has a much better symbiosis of vocals to sound approach. I think the reason is simple. The vocals are super consistent with the heaviness that they offer the record overall. They are perhaps the most common denominator of heaviness throughout the entire album, because like I said, the guitars are very rich, they change quite a bit, the drums are powerful but not necessarily heavy or demolishing, so you have a vocal performance that is extremely important in order to add heaviness and thickness, volume to a certain degree to the way everything comes together, and that is an important aspect that also allows itself to separate or create a sense of separation from the more melodic side of the sound that this record has. It connects well to those heavier guitars that the tracks have, and then it separates really well from the more melodic guitar sound and synth sound that comes across. This creates movement within the songs, and it doesn't allow the vocals to feel completely segregated from the tracks or feel like they don't belong. You're trying to fit the wrong size piece in the wrong part of the puzzle. The vocals blend really well with everything around it because they connect with parts, they enhance others, and they also separate themselves from certain elements within the sound. So more mobility of what the vocals offer, of the perception that they give to the listener. This allows this album to be a little bit of a hybrid, if you will. Definitely a hybrid, complete hybrid of the last two records. This album takes the best that those two albums had to offer, doesn't allow any of those elements to be predominant, to overtake this album, but rather blending them perfectly in order to create something that we've heard before, but not quite to this point. And that is an important aspect because you don't feel like you have to really work hard through this record. The record has a sense of familiarity to it, but at the same time still offering you new ideas, new sounds, new experiences. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with The Darkest City. Great guitar riff. The synths really help define the overall melodic sound of this track, and the guitars are super open, very bright, really allowing the melody within the song to expand, to proliferate throughout the entire track. The verses have a little bit more of a heavy experience to them, but then once you get into the chorus really opens up quite a bit. The verses also have a heavier experience because of the way the vocals hit, and the way the vocals hit connecting really well with that guitar sound definitely offers that more palpable sense of heaviness to the track in that specific moment. But like I said, once you get to the chorus, the chorus is a lot brighter. Even though you still have those heavy vocals, the chorus is a lot brighter, and it feels a lot more open because now the vocals are disconnecting or they're separating themselves from the sound, completely the opposite of what happens in the verses where they feel more integrated with the sound. Great track, a lot of movement. Then you have Ignite the Flame, definitely more dynamic, more driven. Vocally, this track feels a little bit more like an anthem, and that to me felt almost a little bit out of place. Not necessarily out of place from a negative way, but it just felt really different for the band to create a song that has a very anthem-like feel in the sound, in the vocal performance, in the overall construction. It's a very rich and textured track that helps with the anthem aspect that the song has, but I think what really solidifies that experience is the vocal performance. The backing vocals really help with that anthem approach that the track has. The verses are more straightforward. Once again, the chorus blossoms a little bit bigger, having some similarities to The Darkest City in terms of the structure or the approach that they took to the structure, but this song feels, sounds, is offered in a very different way. Definitely one of the most dynamic tracks on this record. Last but definitely not least, my favorite track on the album, Streets of Rage. This song is really cool, and I think it's really cool because it has a simple chorus that is memorable, that is hooky. Both from a musicality standpoint, but also from a vocal approach. Having that chorus really ignites the track. It's how simple it is, how straightforward it is, and how hooky it is. It becomes the lifeline of the song. All roads, all streets, I should say, on this track lead to that chorus. And once that chorus hits, you're hooked. You want to listen to the song, you want to vibe with the song, because the song has great energy. And if I look back at the two previous records, this song, in a lot of ways, in terms of how it comes across, in terms of how hooky it is, the simplicity of the chorus, how enigmatic the chorus is, reminds me of Be the Sky. Not necessarily musically, the two songs don't sound alike at all, but in terms of a structure and in terms of what the chorus on both of those tracks offers, they have a lot of similarities from that standpoint. This is it. Omnium Gatherum, May the Bridges We Burn Light the Way, once again out November 7th on Century Media. Hit me up in the comment section, and I'll see you all at the next video. Take care, guys.